This is the MIAA Weekly.
Welcome to week 7 of MIAA Weekly. John, they never thought we'd get this far. We're more than halfway done with the regular season. How are you holding up, buddy?
We're making it through it. Little 12-hour round trip to Edmond the other day, but got to see a pretty darn good UCO team in action. So not a bad weekend.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah. I was back here at the D2football.com home office of late, and going ahead and making sure everything was going okay with scores and everything else. And oh, look at this, a surprise.
I got a free towel. Yeah, I forgot about that. It's sitting right next to me here.
Wow.
I got a towel for my trouble going all the way to UCO.
Were you panting as you walked the sideline and they thought that you needed something?
No, I think they were supposed to waive those during the game, but unfortunately the Oklahoma-Texas game was at the same time, so there wasn't too much crowd waving. So they had plenty for the media.
Yeah, that was something I kind of noticed, that they didn't necessarily have the fan grouping that they wanted to for that, but I understand the reason why. That's for certain.
They get Pitt in 2 weeks. That might be a little better.
Yeah, I would, and a little bit closer opponent by a distance. And so let's go ahead and kind of pull up what we had for the week here, John. We'll go through the results here momentarily, but we do have a few surprises. And you had a chance to do a little bit of catch up on the weekly pick'em. Not that I'm teasing things too much, but you were chirping a little bit on Saturday as the day went on.
Not that many surprises for somebody who knows how to do their pick'em like I do.
Oh boy, I mean, yeah. We'll see which place that you're in by the time we get there, because I'm not sure if that was that much of a change. But let's go ahead and we had the release from the league. And you were at the game. Probably not a real surprise that Terrell Davis got the award. Is that right?
No, not a huge surprise at all. You could have picked him or Jet Huff, but I think it's a right call. Davis was great. 15 catches, 186 yards. I mean, and Northwest had been really good against the pass this year. I believe they're still the best passing defense in the league even after that. So he had his way there, and he looked all the part of one of the best receivers in the country.
Now, as we go ahead and we take a look on the defensive side, Logan Clark from Mo West got it. Why did he end up with the award, John?
Well, not too many people have picked off Zach Zabrowski the last couple of years, and he did it twice. He did it twice in one game. So if anybody else would have got this award, it wouldn't have made much sense to me. So no, Logan Clark definitely deserved it. Couple interceptions against Zabrowski, 5 tackles, just a really, really solid game, and probably the biggest shocker in the MIAA, unless you're myself and pick the Griffs to win.
Oh boy, it's going to be a long show. Let's move on to special teams. And given the way that UCO played, I'm not real surprised that they ended up getting more than one award this week.
No, I mean, and the 47-yard field goal he kicked right into that beautiful waterfall in Edmond, that alone should have earned it. But he really kicked well, and he struggled a little bit early in this season. He was. Coach Adam Dorr was asked about that after the game, and he's been there a while, and they have confidence in him. And boy, he looked good on Saturday.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into, what ended up being what you and I talked about. It's probably what it can be one of the biggest games of the year in the conference, and we felt was a pretty big game nationally as well, with the Bearcats trying to kind of fight their way back for respect in the top 25 and keep their playoff hopes alive at UCO. And we'll go ahead and kind of dig further into the numbers here in a moment, but you had the chance to make the trip on down. You drove on, what did you say, about 6-hour trip? Was that right, John?
12-hour round trip, but yeah,
Right.
6 hours there, and did in one day, and got back. Left about 5:30 and got back a little before midnight. So not a bad busy day.
Well, you know what? We have a little bit of a video for this game, and we'll get to that in a moment because first we're going to go ahead and look at the pregame. John, you're
Look
in the
at
far
me.
right corner there, getting really close to the action now. As the action began, there was a moment where Chris Runke had a throw where he found you wide open by yourself in the end zone.
Oh
And
my God, I haven't seen it yet.
what was that? You
That
just
was an invasive maneuver.
patted the ball away in a poor effort, and you know
Oh,
who else didn't like your effort? That guy. Look at him. He had thrown his hands up saying, "What is going on with my guy Dykstra back there?" Do you care to explain yourself a little bit?
see, last week I made the joke that maybe I could get a CEO chain from him. I think I earned or lost all my
Yeah, it would have gotten taken
credibility if he
away
won there. Yeah,
before half with that
it would
effort.
have been.
Um,
Well, when you're looking through the lens and that ball looks a lot closer than it is now, and I don't know. No excuses. Anybody who watched the Iowa game kind of saw a similar deal where it actually hit the person.
mm.
So I consider myself fortunate to be alive.
That's where we're going to go with this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and watch the actual game action. And you know, when I went ahead and watched this game later in the evening, my first thought was UCO looks very fast. And you know, in going through this, they go ahead, they march down. Then they ran this dive play two separate times that I recall for a score. They just kind of come up and hit you with the quick hitter, and Davis, you know, when he's running the post routes and things like this, he's a heck of a hard cover. Now, 14-0 game, second quarter, 10 minutes left. You know, Runke goes ahead, doesn't see much, but, you know, a good athlete makes a play here. They call it a score. And 14-7 ball game, 5 minutes left before half. And I'm thinking, or 4 minutes left. I'm thinking, okay, Northwest is still hanging around here. And then they strike again. And it's like, okay, now Northwest is really trying to figure out, you know, how to stay in this ball game before half. And all of a sudden, you know, they get down, you know, 24-7 at the break, John. And it kind of felt like the game was over at that point.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, you saw a lot of those long passes on number 3 for Northwest, and they missed All-American Khalil Smith in this game. He didn't play out there at corner, and they were picking on Austin McKinney, who's one of those guys who's being asked to step up out there. But yeah, UCO was just too much offensively, and you mentioned that speed. They've got at every position, whether it's running back or receiver or even quarterback. So yeah, they're just dynamic. That's the best word for it.
And then you watch, you know, Huff here.
Ooh,
He reminds me just a little bit of like a John Matoka. A little bit of an undersized quarterback, you know, by all indication today's standards.
yeah,
But he
definitely is.
plays with a moxie, and you know he's not going to be the type of guy who's necessarily going to try and dive into the end zone like Matoka would and risk life and
Yeah.
limb. But I see a lot of the same similar attributes in him, John, and that's not a bad guy to get compared to.
Yeah, I was sitting in the press box next to some of their student media, and they were saying how somebody had class with Jet, and you wouldn't guess he's a quarterback by just look at him because he's not that big, but boy, he can play and he can sling it a little bit.
Well, you know, we kind of had felt coming into this week that this would be kind of the first big test. Looking back at it now, because UCM is kind of, you know, falling aside with regard to their defense and so forth. And maybe that win's not going to hold the same credit for it, you know, in the future. But Northwest, I mean, they go ahead and they outgain Northwest by over 150 yards. They don't turn the ball over. Northwest does a few times, And this was a game where there was only a brief moment, in the first half where I kind of felt, okay, this could go either way. Otherwise, it just kind of felt like it was Central Oklahoma on this day. And at the same time, that's kind of how they've been all season, John.
Yeah, it has. And the thing I'll say is about the test is they passed two different kinds of tests. They went head to head with Zabrowski and outscored him, and then they went against probably a top two, maybe top one defense in the MIAA, probably two behind Pitt, and they were able to put up 48 points on them. So they
Right.
won against two very different types of teams and were able to look pretty dominant in both settings. So I just really, really impressed with UCO, and I was already impressed with them. And I was more impressed seeing them live.
Yeah, I think honestly, John, this you were already there in your mind. I
Yeah,
think it's for other national voters like myself to go ahead and be able to see another win like this, and be able to go ahead and kind of mark that one down. And as you go forward, they're going to have another test here in a few weeks with Pitt State. And that feels a lot more like an ultimate test right now,
hmm
because that's going to be really more for the conference championship in all likelihood.
and we talk about name value too. And Central Oklahoma doesn't have it D2 wise as much as some other
No,
teams like a Northwest.
not at
Adam
all,
Dorrell,
really, if we're going to be honest.
Adam Dorrell has it though, and just
Right,
talking to him after the game, he's never going to put any bulletin board material out there.
right.
But you could just kind of sense that quiet confidence, like he was confident in this team, and going forward, he feels very confident in this team. So we'll
Yeah.
see. That'll be interesting. Big one, like we mentioned earlier, with Pitt in a couple weeks.
Oh, they've been the most interesting team in the conference that we've had this
Yeah,
year, John, without a doubt. So,
yeah.
well, as we go ahead and we kind of move on to some of the other action, John, this is one of those few games without a nowhere you made the pick right against all odds.
Every dog has its day. Sometimes, and that dog is me. No, a great game for the Griffins. I was wondering where UCM's headspace would be at, and I don't think it was in the right spot. But I think Missouri Western these last few weeks has kind of impressed me with just the way, even though they're out of the playoff mix and all of that, and out
Right.
of the conference title race, they're still playing hard, and they're giving. They played hard with a couple good teams the last couple weeks, and then finally were able to break through against UCM, who will be real interesting to see moving forward if they can bounce back from wherever they're at right now in their own headspace.
Well, Mo West threw together, a package here. It's kind of like a cinematic video. But you know what? We wanted to go ahead and give them a little bit of love and show some of this. So as we go ahead and we roll the video, here they are going ahead and picking off Zambrowski right away, and then going ahead and getting themselves out ahead on the scoreboard. And they still are an athletic squad, John. And it looks like they're gonna be a little bit more of that tough out, kind of for everybody going forward now. And it makes this league all the deeper, and harder for us, frankly, to be able to pick week to week when you have a club like this who can go ahead and go and have a road win like this one.
Yeah, and you're seeing a couple of those picks out there of Logan Clark, who we mentioned earlier, had
Yeah,
some big ones. I like their offense with Burwald at quarterback, and we'll talk more about him
yeah.
later, but he's more the running threat, and I think they just need that added dimension, especially with Brandon Hall being out. We talked a lot about him and what he was doing at running back before he got hurt, and now they need that running dimension. I think Burwald gives them that in a little bit different of a way.
Yeah, yeah. And once again, that's good for you. You were able to get that one against some odds. Now this game here, when I'm sitting there watching the scores throughout the day, and this one was kind of a slow moving one. And Pitt, the game was close, and then Pitt got ahead, and it just kind of stayed there. I didn't realize until kind of looking back a little later kind of how they got there in this one. And holding Kearney to 138 yards of offense, 9 first downs, and 1 of 11 on third down speaks more to the dominance that this game had for Pitt. And how they got to this 20-10 was a little bit deceiving. But the more you go ahead and kind of dig in, you see maybe Pitt didn't have such a bad game, did they, John?
No, and that's the kind of stat line there on the right that you'd look at from a team that was last in the league. But Kearney has impressed, and they're better than a last place team in this league. And
At home, no less.
and they just dominated them statistically up and down the field. Now Pitt, as the games get tougher, 20 points isn't going to cut it against UCO.
Right.
But that defensive effort is very impressive, and it'll be interesting moving forward because they've got some big games left on their schedule with Northwest and UCO and some games where they need to at least hold their own offensively.
It makes you wonder about stylistically when we get to that Pitt, Central Oklahoma game. It can be a very interesting matchup because Pitt's been playing a style that's a little more safe, where you go ahead and you play strong defense and look to try and dominate on that side of the football and really enforce your will on somebody. It's going to be hard to be able to pull that off against UCO and be able to keep the score from getting in an area that they're not real comfortable with. And I think that's kind of what we're going to be tiptoeing up in a few weeks, John.
I think we saw a little bit of it. It's similar last year to when they were able to hang on and beat UCM by 2. But I'm wondering if they have that same firepower without a Devin Garrison and without some of their guys from last year. And I think UCO's defense is better than UCM's defense last year. But
right.
We got a couple of weeks to talk about that one.
I know. I and I'm allowing myself to get a little ahead there.
We've both done it a little bit, and I'm trying to hold back. But that game's exciting. That's going to be fun.
Now, a week ago, we had Coach on, and apparently we must have been good luck because this is the game that you thought you had figured out for the nightcap, and you were kind of chirping a little bit about how Washington was going to take care of business. Apparently that must have made it up on the wall at Fort Hays because 208 yards allowed, which, let's be honest, Washburn has been a better offensive football team than that kind of showing. But at the same time, Fort Hays, almost 500 yards of offense. In a game where their quarterback goes over 300 yards, Caleb, Heavner, it feels like there's a little bit of a coming out party with him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's just impressive to hold them down to 131 passing yards. With that speed they have, Trey Richardson got loose once for 1 touchdown, but that's the 7 points on the board. He didn't get loose again. So that's impressive to see the Hayes defense kind of playing like the Hayes defense we expected to see all season. And they've got some interesting games coming up too, where I don't know if they can get back in that playoff hunt, but boy, just like we said about Western and maybe even more so on the Hayes side, they could be a real spoiler coming up here.
Well, John, it felt like, once they got their second setback, that all of a sudden, it was fairly early in the season, we kind of moved them to mid-card. And, to the Northwest and the others kind of moved up. I feel like they're kind of moving back into that potential playoff mix very quietly because there's so much noise at the top with others.
There is. There's that weird thing where Northwest kind of beat Hayes and Emporia back-to-back, and they seem to jump both those teams.
Right.
And now, Hayes and Emporia haven't had to play I think Hayes actually has, but UCO and those top teams. But so they have more tests coming, but they're set up right now to control their own destiny, which is kind of all you can ask at this point of the season.
Yeah. So as we go ahead and we move along, the final game we had with Emporia State, Gunnar Gundy ends up missing the trip due to illness at quarterback, and Chase Rickey, oh, by the way, throws for 485 yards. Emporia State is just a passing machine over the years, this year included, obviously. And, their opponent, they're having some troubles, John. How did you see this one, buddy?
They put up 30 points at least. That's
I
at
know.
least something for Southern to hang their hat on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they are very good over there in Emporia at passing the ball. Trenton Collins had 156 yards, and we kind of think of him as the Robin to Tyler Common's Batman. And Tyler Common had 130 yards and two touchdowns, to be fair. But
Right.
Trenton Collins is a really good football player as well. So with him, that kind of rounds out that passing game. And it seems like doesn't matter if it's Gunnar Gundy or Chase Rickey, they're going to be able to put some yardage up. And I even think it's kind of big because their rushing offense started off really well this year, I thought, and it's kind of gone away. And Billy Ross, I mean, it's 77 yards, so it's not a huge game, but 3 touchdowns. It's pretty good game out of him running the ball, and if they can do that, that can really balance it out and help them moving forward. They'll have to prove it against more teams than Southern, but yeah, good result for Emporia.
Well, it's pretty impressive that they are able to get that kind of production from either their 1 or their 2. And so if that's the case, it gives them some kind of depth that few teams are really going to have.
For sure.
Well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the sponsor for our D2 programming, and that's Boss's Pizzeria and Sports Bar. At the very top of the page, it mentions the fact that they're looking for new opportunities. This means franchisees in existing hotel locations to open up a Boss's Pizzeria. 2 spots in Omaha they're looking at, one in Springfield, Missouri, the other one in Mankato, Minnesota. And we figured that we'd mention it here on our MIAA show, given the fact that a lot of that is MIAA country. So if you had the interest in going and opening up a place that's already got over 10 locations in the upper Midwest, on their website, all you need to do is go ahead and look on their franchising page. Make sure you mention us if you have interest. We are trying to help our sponsor be able to find some additional locations. And you know what, John? I had some Boss's Pizza this last week with my kids, along with some boneless wings. And they have a very good hot barbecue boneless wings. I shouldn't have said that. It immediately just made me hungry. So
I was going to say, if you open one up, don't only let them know that you heard about it from us, let us know, because that looks like a fun place to go in and watch a game right there.
Yeah, that's not a bad little setup right there, is it?
No, that's a bunch of TVs and a bar. I can deal with that.
Well, let's go ahead. Let's move ahead with. I figured I'd go ahead and kind of point this on out. I was taking a look today at a friend of the show, Wayne Cavati, who's been on our programming before. He is the head writer for Division II football for the NCAA. And he went ahead and had in his article a whole bunch of players that he highlighted for their performances this last week offensively throughout the country. Well, there's a whole bunch of MIAA guys, so I figured I'd go ahead and kind of pull this aside because, John, when I pulled this on up, I was like, holy mackerel, 3 quarterbacks, 3 receivers.
I was going to say.
And you made an interesting observation about the quarterbacks. They're not necessarily the guys who were going to be the guys at the beginning of the year.
No, Burwell there was either second or third on the depth chart, depending what Missouri Western depth chart you wanted to look at. And of course, we talked a second ago about Chase Rickey stepping in for Gunnar Gundy, who's probably been on this list before himself. So embarrassment of riches there in Hayes.
Yeah. And, I'm great to see those kind of top performances. Now, as we go ahead and we kind of move on to some of the statistics that are just MIAA specific, we kind of figured, you know what, we're far enough in. Everybody's played at least 6 games. Some of them have played 7. That we take a look at offensive numbers, average points per game. This really illustrates now, especially after, Central Oak, went ahead and did what they did against Northwest Missouri State. They're averaging nearly 53 points a game. Now, that said, I also did notice that while Harding is leading the country in points per game, John, Central Oklahoma is leading the country in yards per game. Because they're a combination not just of running, but running and passing, that they're doing both very well.
And
now,
a bit more of a hurry-up offense, too.
No, that's very true. Now, as we take a look at the rest of the slate, something that caught my eye a little bit is kind of what we were alluding to. Pitt State averaging 28.7 a game. I got to be really honest with you. If you took a look at our top 10 in the country, I don't know if anyone else is averaging quite that low a point total per game. That's not really indicative, typically, of a top 10 squad. Is this a little bit of why you have concern about Pitt State, given where you're at with them now?
Yeah, a little bit. I will say if you look at the top 10 in the country, I mean, not to be the MIAA homer, but it's not every team's not playing the consistently solid teams week in and week out that Pitt is. Even if they're not other top 10 teams in the country, they're teams that can put up a fight. But yeah, it's not where you want to be when you're in the lower half of the conference and you've got national championship hopes. So yeah, it's something they need to get turned around. I think they can because they're veteran enough on that side. But yeah, it's something they certainly need to look at. And the other part that is just kind of shocking, if you would have told me before the season, if you would have told me Northwest Missouri was within 6 points per game of Central Missouri, and Northwest had 3 losses, that would stun me. And
right.
Third in the league in scoring. That's so. No, this is not how you would have predicted going at the beginning of the season, but it's all that interesting that those preseason polls don't matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I can still recall our preseason show that we did, John, and it was pretty definitive. It was going to be UCM, Pitt, and Northwest with a clear-cut top 3. Well,
yeah, I was a little
here we are, a little different
on Northwest at that point, if you remember, because of my Hayes love. It wasn't Central Oklahoma love. It was
right.
I thought Hayes would be up there, but yeah, UCM and Pitt were clear 1-2, and yeah, Pitt's still up there, but the Mules are not.
Yeah, and most of the reason for that is frankly on this next graphic we're looking at, John. As we kind of look further at the page, Pitt State's defense points per game is leading the conference. Now, that said, Central Oklahoma is not terribly far back. And, you can see that, whether it's Kearney, Emporia, Fort Hays, they've all played some pretty good defense this year. Then you go ahead and you move further down the list, and, Central Missouri being at 35 points per game is just not something that you see from a top 25 team. And you know what? They really haven't found a way to curb that yet, John, and we've been talking about it for weeks.
That's the reason they're not a top 25 team anymore. They are, yeah, that defense isn't going to get it done. I'm kind of surprised they're not dead last. I know Missouri Southern's had its share of struggles, but boy, when you watch Central Missouri, it's not pretty on that side of the ball. So, yeah, this one's a little bit more how we would expect the teams to shake out. The one that really stands out to me, actually, is Nebraska Kearney at number 2. That is not where we had them pegged. And Emporia, too, at number 3.
Yeah, Emporia surprised me as well. I've never thought of them as a defensive team, if I'm going to be really honest.
Nope, never have. So, I mean, Hayes, Northwest, those teams, Western, those guys have a little bit more of a defensive tradition, and some of that scheduling, and it'll shake out in the wash.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to kind of take the snapshot in time here.
Yeah. Now, as we go ahead and we take a look at things nationally, John, I would happen to just be looking at the passing efficiency numbers nationally, all across D2. I pull up the thing, and you know what? The number one guy, Jet Huff. And I immediately thought, oh, Dykstra's going to be, yep.
If you don't know, now you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, now, if we go ahead and we take a look on this page, oh yeah, he's got the towel. Now, by the way, when that game started to get out of hand, did they have you waving the towel by the end? Were you just in Rome, just living it?
They did not have me, but I was enjoying that waterfall and that atmosphere in Edmond. So
which I love that, and I love seeing that in the shot and everything else we had. But now Caleb Heavner being on this list, that surprised me. I wasn't expecting this. Now, I didn't realize he's thrown 6 tuds, no picks yet. That'll help you be on this list. And he's completed 77 passes of 101. I can do that math. That's pretty good numbers there too. So, good for him. And as we go ahead and we move a little bit further down the list, I think Zach Zabrowski being 24th and being that far down, in my opinion, was almost as equally pronounced. Like, this is a little bit of a result of the last few weeks, John.
Yeah.
When they've been losing games and frankly just have not been even in those firefights fully because they're just not hanging around long enough.
He's been pressured to do more than he had to do last year. They weren't playing from behind that often last year, and that interception total is what drives him down, and that's what happened last year. Everything was in rhythm. You have a guy like Arkell Smith on the outside. It's a little different this year. He's still playing very well.
Yes.
But when you're playing from behind and you have limited running game like they do without Marcellus Hawkins, there's a lot on his shoulders right now, and even who I still think is among the best players in the country, that's even a lot for him to handle.
Yeah, they've been dinged up on the O-line and so forth as well, and it's definitely, it just hasn't been the season for UCM that they were hoping coming in. Now, Jet Huff, given his passing yards here and how well UCO is playing, I think that if you were going to, go ahead nationally and take a look at a handful of names for the Harlan Hill, he's very much in the thick of that conversation. Sammy Edwards from Valdosta's in there, and some others of that sort. But I don't think he's any worse than top 3, John. And I don't even have I'm not looking at running backs here or receivers, but I just feel like he's way up in that conversation at the midway mark here.
Yeah, because if I think you're going to give it to a receiver, you might be giving it to his teammate. So
exactly.
That's when you've got the best receiver statistically, at least in the country, which I don't know if he completely is, but they've got a lot of talent on that team, and I asked you about pre-show, and I haven't done my research to know who else is, but boy, I have a hard time imagining anybody playing better now than he is.
Exactly. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the standings in the conference. As we go ahead kind of left to right on the page, you can see the MIAA numbers, then the overall. Either way, UCO is up at the very top there. And then we've got, Emporia State, we've got Pitt State, both with one setback in conference and overall as well. And, then from there, you've got Fort Hays, I think, is still very much around in the race for the playoffs. I think if they lose another one, they're probably at risk because I don't know if Super Region 3 is going to see a squad with 3 losses make the dance this year. My immediate hunch is probably not, because you've got a lot of teams like a Harding or a Grand Valley or a Ferris and others who are currently unscathed and could very well, you may end up having 2 or 3 undefeated teams in that super region itself.
Yeah.
So,
Ferris
well,
did get scathed by Pitt, but
right.
yeah. So, but it's going to be hard with the kind of the way the GAC sets up. It's probably going to be there's going to be an undefeated team, there's going to be a 1-loss team, there's going to be a 2-loss team. So
Right.
it's you gotta get in front of them on the card. And when we look at those, I mean, Northwest already has 3 losses. Hayes has some tough games left. Already has 2. So you're really, to me, you're looking at Emporia and Pitt, and neither of them have played Central Oklahoma yet. And there's a lot to figure out. The MIAA kind of needs some things to go right to maximize their playoff odds at this point.
Well, John, a good thing for a team like the Bearcats of Northwest is that while they are at 3 setbacks currently, one of those is against Mankato, who could very well be the number 1, in Super Region 4 if things were to, if they were to play out, the way they have. So that loss is not going to be bad, but the fact that you have a loss is the bigger situation.
And
So,
Pittsburg State has Ferris is going to probably finish with 1 or 2 losses. Emporia and Hayes both played Angelo State, and they're looking like they're playing well right now. So this is why we bring up sometimes those non-conference games and keeping tabs on them afterwards, because it matters when you start to try to sort that stuff out.
well, once week 8 hits, that's when the regional rankings will come on out. We're not very far away from that, John. So
Time flies
I'll
when
be
you're
real
having
frank.
fun.
I'm not ready for all that math just quite yet. So let's go ahead and just kind of keep playing the league schedule here for a little bit longer. Now, if we go ahead and we take a look at the top 25, you can see kind of the kind of the gray shaded MIAA squads. Really, the biggest news here on this page is as far as the MIAA goes, and is UCO getting rewarded for and a bump for beating Northwest. And I mentioned to you before the show, this is very similar to, you're a squad that's not really well known nationally, and you beat a Michigan or you beat a Notre Dame. People take notice when Northwest loses games. And this is one of those kind of games where when you also had Northwest, building back on up the way they had, John, having won 4 in a row, that's what I attribute that jump to. Because if I look here, they jumped a Western Colorado. They jumped a Mankato in the process. Those teams didn't lose, John. So as you go ahead and you kind of look there, not much. Emporia was 17 a week ago, if my memory serves me right. Pitt State was the same. So that's kind of the big player here. Now, what I found a little interesting, John, is there is a little different philosophy that we have with our voter group with d2football.com and our poll than the coaches poll does, because the coaches still, if I'm not mistaken, you got Central Oklahoma at 11. I don't even know if they moved a spot. Maybe they moved up 1 because of a loss with Central Washington, but I don't even remember if they had them that high to begin with. But they kind of have more of a philosophy that someone has to drop for you to move up. John, I'm not a huge fan of that. I really think that you reward the teams who have dramatic outcomes.
No, yeah, we talked before how this isn't standings. You got to look
Right.
at who's playing well. I mean, 2 of the top 5 teams have a loss there with Pitt State and Ferris State, and it's because the way they're playing and the talent that they've shown on those teams. I mean, Minnesota State also has a loss. They have a lot of quality wins, so that's how you kind of stick in that top 10 despite maybe having a setback. So I think that's that's the thing to look at is it's that combination of judging what's your resume, but also what are you capable of moving forward, and what can we kind of foresee you get into come November and December.
Now, truth be told, I know, John, you've had them a little higher for a few
I
weeks.
do.
I had Central Oak at 6 this week on my own.
Okay.
Now, that said, the people out east who are seeing Kutztown, heck, whether they win 24-0, something like that, and
Yeah.
their defense has been dominant. So, it's hard to, each person who is a fan of a team, it's kind of like we're in the forest and that
Mm.
person's going to look a whole lot at one tree as
Yeah.
opposed to looking at the whole forest. And when we go ahead and where we have all our voters, if you're out east or you're out west, you're probably going to pay more attention to those pockets you're in versus ones that you don't come across all the time. So that's the value of kind of having a mixture of people, whether it's ourselves or the coaches, to kind of be able to come up with those numbers. And,
And this,
as we move forward, John, this is really going to slowly become for entertainment purposes only, because the regional rankings are really going to
yeah.
be the thing that's going to matter on all of that.
And with the different voters too, you come at from a different way of maybe some around here would say, well, we've seen in the playoffs, Super Region 1 is not Super Region 3,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. But it's on this year, and that's kind of what comes with regionalization. You see the matchups that you can see. So I don't hold it against anybody who has a different philosophy. I have Central Oklahoma number 4 ahead of Pittsburg State because we've covered before. I think they're a better team right now than Pitt State is. But
Yeah,
guess
I
what?
can
We get to
understand
figure
that.
out in 2 weeks. So,
Yeah,
and then I have Pitt ahead of Ferris because we saw it on the field, and it kind of trickles down. But it's hard to it's hard to fault anybody as long as there's not a major outlier in there. Kind of everybody could come at it from a different way.
that's a fair point. Um, Going ahead,
Whew. Can't come at this from any other way than that
yeah.
was a domination.
I was taking a look at the games and I saw, man, I went 2 and 3. When I'm looking at and I've got more X's than I do games circled,
Ooh.
not a good sign. And I mean, about that. You went 1 for in week 3.
Look at all those, yeah.
Now since then, you've been kind of on the comeback. 4 and 1 this last week. Massey 3 and 2. That kind of leads us into a little bit of what everyone's here for, which is our next set of games. And by the way, before we do, everyone take notice of the fact that Witt is still ahead of John after all that silliness I had a week ago. Still ahead
But
of
you're
Dragster.
getting a little nervous now.
Not so much. I think I got this slate figured out. We got Missouri Southern going to Topeka to take on Washburn. I know you have the Massey numbers. What does Massey think on this one?
Massey has Washburn at home as a 10-point favorite.
Okay. Does Washburn cover that number, John? Or are you taking Missouri Southern to kind of get off the canvas and win this one?
I think it's a pretty solid number since Missouri Southern's offense showed a little life last week. But I've talked before about Washburn's speed and how impressive that is. I think that's going to be a lot for Missouri Southern to handle. Give me Washburn winning this one 38-24. So I have them covering.
I'm not in love with how Washburn got here, having put up 7 points and 200 yards of offense a week ago. But I think the quality of opponent, especially the defense, is measurably different. I like them at home in this one. I don't know if they cover the 10, but I do like them to win. Central Oklahoma at Northeastern State. Ooh, this one feels like this will be a friends and family only game. What does Massey have? I'm going to guess somewhere in the 40-point range.
No, Massey's got some faith in the Riverhawks.
More than I do.
Minus 31. So, yes, I think we both have UCO probably covering this one.
Yeah, I do, and so do you. And moving right on to the next game because I don't think that one's
55-7 if anybody wants the answer to the test.
I think it could.
55-7.
I think that would be after 3/4. That might be. But Nebraska Kearney. Ooh, this is a tough one. In St. Joe against the Griffins, coming off of their win, and Kearney. So there's a whole recency bias we talked about on our other show the other night. Do you buy into Kearney having very little offense last week? Or, do you go at Western with how they just did? Because if you look at weeks previous, you wouldn't be landing on those same squads. And this is kind of a tough one, don't you think?
I think it is, and Massey agrees. The old NFL thing you'd always hear would be home field would be worth 3.5 points. Well, that's about where they land. It's a 4-point advantage for the home team with Missouri Western being favored in this one. And not so fast, Massey. I'm going to go the other way and try to make up some points on Massey this week. I'm going the Lopers 20, the Griffins 17. Griffins served me well last week, but I'm turning on them this week.
You're probably making the smart pick here. Now, I am probably allowing myself to be suckered in by some of the athleticism and some of the plays they were making on the highlight tape.
Ryan Bentley did his work well.
Well, apparently. I'm going to go with Western winning another one here. I think this is a tough one, though. I think this is a 30-27 kind of game, but I do have Western in this one.
To explain myself, since I think it's always kind of interesting when we go on different sides, that Nebraska Kearney defensive line has really impressed me this year. And I think Missouri Western has a young offensive line that UCM wasn't really able to take advantage of. I think, oddly enough, Nebraska Kearney might be more equipped to take advantage of that. But it's going to be a good game in St. Joe, that's for sure.
I'm concerned that the Nebraska Kearney defense does well and that they rebound a little bit in that game.
Yeah.
But I'm going to stay with them. With Western.
Homecoming for Western, too. So I know that mattered on the Sunday show the other day. So
yes.
If you're one that takes homecoming into account, Western gets the bump.
Yes. Fort Hays State at Pitt State. Now, we're going to go ahead. My guy John did a little bit of a breakdown for us and what we think is probably, the most important game of this week, if we're going to be honest. And when you broke down the numbers here, John, and I was taking a look, and I don't just mean the scoring average being the same. There's a lot of numbers that are very similar. Now, Pitt State's defense, yards per game is about another 70 better. But rush defense is the biggest category I'm seeing a difference in there. This game, I think, may be a little bit tougher to pick. What is Massey looking at? Do they have Pitt maybe by 2 scores?
Pitt is the 8-point favorite. I think a lot of that is probably a little bit of the historical stuff Massey puts in, because these numbers are very, very similar and very interesting to me. How they kind of, especially when you factor in that rushing offense, Central Oak is number 1 with a bullet in that, and they've played in rushing offense, that is, and they played Fort Hays and they haven't played Pitt yet. So maybe that attributes a little bit to Hays being behind in that category. But boy, these numbers make this look like this is going to be a fun day in the jungle.
So, that said, if this game was getting played at Fort Hays, I think I would be really apt to go ahead and lean that direction here with how they've been playing. And their defense, I have faith in.
Yeah.
At the jungle, I have a hard time pulling the trigger on that one. I'm going to take Pitt State, but I think this is going to be a close game. I've got like a 24-21 kind of game for Pitt State. I don't have them covering that number. How do you see this one?
You've been copying off my notes again. 24-21 Pitt State.
Is that right?
That's what I've got written down in the what I submitted for our picks. So
Gotcha.
yeah, 24-21. We see this very similar. I would love to pick Hayes just to be interesting and go with the upset here, but I couldn't quite do it all in the jungle. Yeah, I'm like you. If it would have been in Hayes, I might have pulled the trigger. But boy, with Hebner playing that way, that makes this a whole lot more interesting than maybe it was a couple weeks ago.
The challenge is, though, he has not seen a defense quite like Pitt State.
He got inserted after the Northwest week, and that's probably the closest facsimile to what they have going. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting game, though, to see if he can kind of keep that going against the Gorillas.
I know this isn't going to play well in Maryville. I think Pitt State's defense is easily better than the Northwest defense.
I said closest facsimile. I didn't say the same thing. So,
I'm emphasizing easily better, but that's bound to go wrong. So, speaking of that defense,
oh boy,
that defense is a lot better though than the other defense. So Central Missouri comes on into Northwest. You know what? If you're Central Mo, your coach Lamberson, he's not going to look to go on into Maryville and just get stomped by the Bearcats and have this season go off the rails. This is going to be, this is not a game they got to get up for. They're going to be ready for this. I don't know if they currently have defensively what they need to make this happen, but Northwest's offense can give it away also at times. So how do you see this one?
Well, first of all, Massey sees this as a touchdown favorite for Northwest, which I think is a fair line, I guess. I think Northwest would definitely be the favorite, especially at home. But when I look at it, even from last year, this was a 3-point game, and Central Missouri was playing a lot better last year than they are this year. And I would even argue, even though the record is pretty similar, Northwest is playing better this year than last year, at least on offense. And they put up 38 points in that game, lost 41-38. So anyway, that's my long-winded way of saying that I think I've got Northwest coming through in this one, 34-28. So I didn't know when I made that pick that was a 7-point line, but I guess I have UCM staying within that margin, but Northwest winning by a score.
So for everyone keeping score at home, the Dykstra taking the other team against the Bearcat shenanigans has come to an end. He's now trying to actually win the pick'em, which I see cost him several picks. But
I'm never getting that Southern week back.
You know what?
By one, that looms large.
This is going to be one of those that I feel like I should have picked. Now, keep in mind, a week ago, I took Kearney to win until they were hosting Pitt. I thought it was the right scenario for Kearney to pull an upset. Instead, they laid an egg. In this game here, man, I'm tempted to take. I have a bad feeling, John, that I'm going to take Northwest to win this because I feel like defensively, just by default, they should. But I have this bad feeling, John, that all of a sudden I'm going to be looking at scores on Saturday. I'm going to hit my phone, and I'm going to get 21-3 Central Mo is up, and I'm going to go. And finally it happened where they put it all together for a game.
Against Washburn and against Central Oak, what hurt Northwest? Speed on the outside. Central Missouri, if they got one thing, they got speed on the outside.
I can't quite pull the trigger on it.
I'll try to talk you into it.
I'll take Northwest winning. I'm going to go ahead and go 31-24 in this one.
Okay.
Right on the number.
Where I'm at. Yep.
Yeah. Well, as you and I have gone ahead,
So one difference this week. I'm a big Kearney guy this week. Go Lopes.
Apparently that's where we're at with this. Now, for those who are tuning in to find out what's in the mailbag, got some more user questions. How did you end up doing last week? I remember it was some good, some bad. Do I have that about right?
I did. I was above 500 last week. I was 3-2.
Okay. Well, so let's keep track at home on how John does this week. First question here. What team in the MIAA is not only tops in third down defense, but also fourth down defense, while also having the best turnover margin in the MIAA at plus 11?
Well, that was helpful to eliminate one team. My thought process, the turnover margin.
A team that wears green?
Yes.
Okay.
A team that wears green. I was like, the defense been pretty good on third down, but there's an obvious answer that I'm not sure is the correct answer. Give me third down defense, fourth down defense, and turnover margin.
Yes. We're not going to repeat all the questions, are we?
Give me Pitt State. I'll go with the obvious one and be wrong.
Emporia State is the answer.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. The Hornets.
Yep. So right now we're starting off with an X to start this. Okay. What wide receiver? If we were doing, like our friend Chris Ferguson, we were doing
fantasy wide receivers.
Fantasy.
There's a couple options in this league.
What wide receiver has the most fantasy points in the MIAA this year? And I'm going to give you 50-50.
I mean, it's Common or it's Davis.
That's the 50-50. Which way are you going?
I thought you were going to say you give me two guesses. I was going to be excited about that one.
No.
Give me the initials.
Okay, Tom.
I'm going Mr. Davis. I think he's made up ground these last couple weeks.
He has. You're correct. They've scored. Both have reached the end zone 9 times, and Mr. Davis is averaging about 40 yards more per game.
Yeah, I knew he'd have the yardage edge.
And they both caught the same amount of balls so far. So you got that one right. Column. So we're back to even. What team has been the least penalized in the MIAA?
I'm going to go with.
By the way, this is John Dykstra, folks, our MIAA expert. Trying to figure out the least penalized team in the conference, and he is incorrect with Nebraska Kearney. It is Pitt State.
Dang.
So we are at 1 right, 2 wrong.
Okay, that's okay.
On the way to 3 wrong. Who led the MIAA in receiving yards a season ago?
Arkell Smith.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh, you know what? I probably spoke too soon. You had the right answer. I didn't give you a chance to talk yourself out of it, which you were prepared to once you realized that Tyler Common might have been very close.
I think I was going to stay with Arkell, but Tyler did creep into my head there a little bit. But Arkell Smith for the win. 2-2.
And here we go.
Is this the deciders or just 5 questions?
This is the decider. This is what team has thrown for the fewest yards in the MIAA this year, and it's a over 300-yard difference total. So it's not even close.
For the fewest yards, okay. I've got a decent feeling in my head of who it might be, and I'm trying to talk myself through it real quick. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Oh, it's them, isn't it? Missouri Western.
We are pretty sure you are mistaken, sir.
Dang, Kearney. Kearney was my
Kearney is the correct answer.
Dang
so
it.
We get 3 wrong, 2 right for the week, and
I was going to say Kearney the whole time, and then Western jumped out at me.
Well, you
Dang,
would have
for a
only
while.
had one right if I hadn't already given you Arkell Smith prematurely.
I was going with Arkell.
No, we are convinced you are not going to stay with that because you second guess yourself. So, well, John, let's go ahead and kind of move to something that's a little bit closer to near and dear to your heart. Somebody that you know for very well. On Thursday, you're going to be releasing a piece on Coach Mel Churchma. And go ahead, if you would, talk a little bit about Mel's situation, what he's going through, and so forth, to some of our MIAA audience who may not be aware of his situation.
I was going to say, I think it's pretty well known with the Northwest audience, but for the rest of the MIAA, Coach T was diagnosed with leukemia, as it says on the screen there. Went in for his yearly physical, had some shortness of breath, and came back and got diagnosed with that. So he's been in Kansas City. He hasn't been in Maryville the last few months, since August, and going through a couple rounds. He's through his second round of chemotherapy, gonna begin his third round this week, and hopefully be getting back to Maryville pretty soon there. But I had the opportunity to talk to some of his friends in the coaching ranks, and do a little story and just get caught up on Mel too, who was very open about his process going through this and said a lot about it. So a lot from Coach in there, and just how he's kind of staying focused with football and maybe watching more MIAA than he even usually does. Just being isolated and trying to stay healthy down there and catching up on games. So
maybe you'll have to send him a few links to keep him entertained.
Really fun to, I don't know. This might frustrate him more hearing us two talk.
I can understand
being one of the winningest coaches out there, but no, he's a great guy. Obviously, anybody that's ever met Mel, and really looking forward to seeing him get back. And it was fun. I will add, Northwest has a site where you could go and put your well wishes to Coach T, because they don't want to inundate him with text or phone calls. You can put one on there, and just scrolling through that is kind of fun to look at the names who have commented on there. There's a ton of former players and things, but one stands out to me is Jerry Partridge got on there. And for those familiar with the MIAA, Jerry and Mel, they've gone back and forth on the field, and that's kind of fun to see the support across the MIAA, with the all-time wins leader at Missouri Western tipping his cap to Coach T and wishing him the best. So just in this, it stinks that something like this happens to kind of put out all those good vibes, but Coach T has a lot of people wishing him the best, and including, I know, both of us on this show. So get well soon, Coach.
Yeah, and you know what, John? What's funny is you mentioned that for people who know him. I got a chance to know Coach back in the spring of 2021. We were coming right off COVID. University of Sioux Falls played a spring contest down there because there was a lot of that going on while teams were trying to get back into gameplay. And so Sioux Falls came down there for a scrimmage, at Northwest and Maryville. And I came down to visit Brandon and so forth, just as friends. And we went to the game, and I got introduced to Coach, and we chatted for a bit. And he immediately, upon learning where I was from, he asked if I knew Coach Bob Young, who is basically Mel Churchma of the University of Sioux Falls. And Coach Young passed away about 1 year ago. The stadium's named after him. And, he won national titles in the NAIA world and was the head coach for a guy named Kalen DeBoer, who is kind of moved up a little bit from there. Now he's at Alabama. But talking with Coach T, and he's originally from South Dakota. So it was kind of an interesting deal. He and I chatted. Then all of a sudden, each year when we've been covering the national title, game, and we're up in McKinney. I'm up on a balcony, one floor up with Brandon and company doing interviews. Coach T will always stop one out for an interview, even if he and I have our teeth chattering and it's cold out there or whatever it is. And you know what? I remember last year interviewing him, John, and I said, Coach, got to ask you, help me out a little bit with what's going on with Northwestern right now, because they hadn't made the playoffs, and I knew he wanted to have a little talk about it. So he said, hey, we're having some challenges with keeping quarterbacks healthy and blah blah blah. And she's so engaging, so friendly. And the fact that he still has the vigor he does to look out for the health of Division II football in the way he does, John, and other coaches see that and really gravitate towards it. He's a tremendous ambassador for Division II football. He really is.
Truly is, and yeah, he's doing well. The update for it is he says he's feeling great, and is really seems like he's hopefully turned the corner. Obviously, all that is up to doctors and tests and things, but he says he's feeling great and really kind of feeling back to himself. So that's great to hear for Coach.
Absolutely. Well, John, we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap things up. Let our viewers know a little bit about, who kind of helped us out with video and how they can go ahead and get a copy of what you're doing on Thursday.
Yeah, the MIAA networks are consistent. We love to watch games and then pull some highlights from them. So thank you to that, and they always do a great job. And then I mentioned earlier Ryan Bentley and the folks over at Missouri Western Athletics helping us out, which is kind of hard to find. Usually we have some TV stations and things like that, but for this one, we went straight to the source in the school and we're able to get some highlights for you there. But as far as me, we'll have Northwest Gamer from UCO. I had some nice comments on that story actually from some UCO people. Wasn't really written from their point of view, but they appreciated the coverage nonetheless. And we'll preview this week for UCM as well as a long story with Coach Churchma, which you've kind of helped out with and gotten some resources there. So pretty full forum this Friday, and you can follow Maryville Forum Sports on Facebook or Twitter to see more of that, and go to maryvilleforum.com if you want to read some stories and use up your free clicks there, or maybe even subscribe. That'd be great too.
Now, John, you guys have a heck of a deal going. If people are really interested in subscribing, which is really, this is just something that's John's, regular, regular deal. John, explain to them a little bit if they want to go ahead and get more coverage of not just, Bearcat stuff, but you do a knockout job with MIAA stuff in general. What's kind of the situation you guys currently have with a subscription?
Yeah, for most people, I think if you're listening to this and not in Maryville itself, you're probably going to just want to do the online. It's just $29 for a year.
That's great.
I'm terrified of what I spend $29 on in a year. So
yeah.
It's probably hopefully some things that I'd get a lot less use out of than reading my stuff. So hopefully, if you feel so inclined, come on over and subscribe to that, and we'll try to keep you entertained, even if maybe Northwest isn't your number one team out there, but you wanna keep up on the league. I know basketball's right around the corner, and that's a horrifying thought for me right now, but we'll have some basketball stuff coming out for league-wide stuff at some point here in the not-too-distant future.
Fair enough. One kind of last closing item, John, as we wrap on up. We had been doing the Brandon Meisner t-shirt fundraiser, John, and, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look on where we're at with that right now. I've been pleasantly surprised, as you know, John, and that is literally coming to an end here, by the time this show broadcasts and so forth. But today, because things wrap up tonight, we cleared the 100 shirts sold number that we were looking for. John, we're at 103 right now.
Awesome.
So I want to just thank a lot of people for kind of taking something that we did, just kind of on a whim, and for that's brought in over $3,000 on the fundraiser for Brandon, which is tremendous, to help him as much as we can with any physical therapy and anything else we can get him along this way to get him back. So I appreciate everyone who helped on out with that. And if you still have interest in trying to help Brandon out, he still does have a live GoFundMe page for Brandon Meisner. But we're going to go ahead and kind of end on that note. John, I appreciate you making time once again. And we'll see how things are and if I am still leading the pick'em after this week's games, my friend.
Go Lopes.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.